Where to begin? Okay.
It was always a very strange beginning. I never really had any real interest in any of this. And of course, to begin with, what happened was that when you are touched by this singularity, it affects you in a really large way. And of course, the beginning part was, well, the system that we serve tells us that there is no such thing as survival after death and that UFOs and aliens don't exist. And I wanted to find out whether or not I was lying or they were lying. And of
Yes.
course, I think we can pretty much fathom out where we stand on that page.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And something else that I love, you are you know the things that you know what you've seen and experienced and what you've researched and you have these strong beliefs, but you're also so open-minded to just other possibilities, other people's opinions. And
Yes.
I love where you're coming from just all around. It's so great.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that when we're dealing with the human, because when we look into the past in terms of our originalities, our genesis,
Yeah.
and that's an area that really interests me, is we find that the version that we've been sold is not quite the real version.
Not quite.
And I think that the real version would have most of our jaws hanging on the floor. And incidentally, in this world of paranormal and UFO research, we discovered that everything or most subjects are labeled and put in a box. But what we
Mhm.
have to understand is that human consciousness is actually unique to the individual. And therefore, our understanding of human consciousness is very limited under the direct control of centralized programming.
Yes.
So I love it, Ali, when you're just as much as part of all of this as we are. We are all individual and
Yes. Yes.
important instruments into the unfolding ness of reality. And so your experiences are true to you as mine are to me.
Yes.
And although there are certain patterns that we can connect, which secures the fact that
Mm.
there is proof that these other realities actually exist.
Hmm.
So yeah, absolutely. I've always been very open to many of the theories or experiences that people have had, and you'll find also that you'll go through a period of transmutation.
Hmm.
Giving a simple example, when I was a kid, and when we had our first major UFO sighting of a strange object with our maternal grandmother. I say we, that is my identical twin brother Ronald and myself. That in that day, you thought or you believed through current research that UFOs were physical nuts and bolts craft coming in from another planet.
Mm.
But the further you go into your research and the years as we evolve and ideas change, we begin to embrace new ideologies. And I dare say that where we are today, in another 20 years' time, if we do survive that as a species, we will go through a further progression of transmutation in terms of thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting how once you kind of start to take a deep dive into all of this, it really the lines get blurred between what's subjective and objective. It really does when you understand consciousness and our thoughts, and that consciousness is truly creation and our reality. And I mean, when you really take a deep dive and you really try to wrap your mind around all of that, it's like, oh wow,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
all
That's what.
happening.
Yeah. I mean, we're all unique. We're all
Yes.
special. We as humans, as I said before, going back, we have a basic structured outline of what we are and what we're about and how to live. And I think that in terms of our understanding of not only ufology, but also near-death experience,
Yes.
conscious research,
Yes.
gives us hope because most of us in life are wondering what's it all about. We
Mhm.
live, and I've got to say this, I mean, most of the time we live in a world that's very structured in the sense that it's all about money and it's all about achieving things and less about getting in touch with what we represent on a spiritual level, if I dare use that word lightly. So I think the phenomena for me certainly has opened up many gateways of thinking, and certainly in terms of what we represent, because, when we look at the Earth and we look at space, and on the physical level that we most notably see it at the moment, that is kind of scary. Because I always thought as a kid, well, if I was to jump off the earth, and this is just a child's example of how we think, if I was to jump off the earth and go down, would I keep going down, or would I eventually come back up on the top of the earth? And so this idea about space, of time, and then of course moving forward to interdimensional hypothesis, which is really quite fascinating. So I think for myself and for many others, it's not just about looking into the UFO angle of the phenomena, it's also embracing the other part of what we represent. And I remembered many long years ago, when I was involved in UFO research, which I still am today, what I discovered was that then the spiritual aspect came in. And most people have asked me, well, is it because you had a UFO experience that set this another opening forward for you? This is what opened up the gateway to being psychic. Well, we're all psychic. If you have a brain, it's a transmitter and receiver, rather like a crude version of a mobile phone, I suppose. Depends on how many apps you use on it. Some people use a lot and some people use a few of them, but they're all there. So it's interesting how making that connection between the spiritual and the eternal consciousness to this other issue that we have at the moment with UFO contact
Mhm.
and multiple levels of contact. By the way, I'm not just talking about the greys, which are famous within UFO lore, or our idea that they're coming from another planet as opposed to another dimension. And to begin with, I was it was very difficult for me to actually embrace all these other experiences that people were having, because the media was programming you, and even within ufology,
Mm.
that it's all nuts and bolts, that they're coming from Zeta Reticuli or the Orion star system. But when you start looking into the area of consciousness, soul survival, reincarnation, incarnation, and most certainly looking into the areas of past historical happenings like Egypt, Mesopotamia, and all these areas. Well, the Egyptians knew about the Orion star system. They
Mhm.
knew about, the Pleiades.
Mhm.
And this then opens up this question of, well, when we die, it's not just a heaven filled with humans. We have perhaps incarnated on these other worlds, the Orion star system within that belt, or the Pleiades, and many, many other star systems. So this is where I said before going back, that your whole structure, your belief
Yeah.
system, then has to open, because if you're restricted, it's not going to allow us to evolve or to explore these other territories which people are talking about.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it's interesting because we're starting to see, to your point, we're starting to see the overlap with NDEs and UFOs and all of that. And it's when you really think about it, if you're talking about our creation, if you're talking about spirituality in the sense of creation and the universe, and I mean, it makes complete sense that that would overlap with everything. And
Yeah, yeah,
everything overlaps with each other, it all
yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the harsh lessons that we learn in life, certainly when people die, those that are very near and dear to us, and the mechanical nature of life that goes round in a circle. Now, for me and for most of my family members who are very much interested in these subject matters, I wanted to find the truth, because that hurt when we lose someone that is so dear to us and so connected to us, and all we have is this collation of memories. I wanted to find out where they were. I wanted to find out if there was proof in life after death. And that was all attributed again to my maternal grandmother.
Mm.
Now, what's interesting is that when you start looking into this area, I mean, I'm like a dog with a bone. I can't let things go. You open up one part to do with communication and how that's achieved through the sensory and mental connection. And then I was like trying to find out, well, where are they? Where are they? Where are they existing? What is beyond that point? Are we just humans? When we go to heaven, is it just a human experience? What about the astral planes? What about the other levels of dimensions of awareness? And then, of course, this really was interesting for me because I think I'm working on a new book at the moment that's going to be released next year called The Eternal Avatar, which explains about the soul, about you as the avatar and of consciousness. And let me tell you, Ali, going into the research of that was kind of like head banging for me because it's
Yeah.
like, we have some beings that came in that never came through the natural process of reproduction. Thoth is one of them, through light. And of course, as we find then, light is vibration and light creates. So this is very interesting when we look at what we represent as the human that goes through the reproductive program and comes into the incarnation process with a wiped memory, although I believe that sometimes we have access to a few of those memories that
Mm.
bleed through within our cognizance as we go through this life, but sometimes still leaves us confused. So like you and many other people, within the Department of Conscious Research with soul survival, did then marry together the other concepts of this UFO contact or the whole experience is happening on multiple levels of reality. People say, I want proof. I
Yeah.
want proof. And I have another friend here in England, a brilliant researcher by the name of Paul Sinclair, who has written the truth proof books, and he says the truth that leaves no proof, because what we're seeing here is that these other existences, these other realities are operating on varied levels that are separate from our dimension of reality, and so there has to be a bridging or a connection that happens briefly or temporarily to make that connection. So yeah, it's kind of like for me, you do tend to get to that stage where you think, my goodness, this is too much. I'm going to be on overload. But then, of course, what happens is that your psyche goes through a process of kind of like acceptance
Yes.
and tearing away or breaking away those old models which the system has imposed upon your centralized programming or conditioning. It doesn't mean to say that the system's wrong about everything. When I say the system, I mean the governments, the system that controls. And again, going back to that really horrible way of just everything is so basic to them, and so here it is, and there's no more. And it's wonderful, people like yourselves, souls like yourselves, and many others who are chipping away and digging away to say, hang on a minute, hang on just a moment, just a goddamn minute. There's something wrong here. There's a big problem.
Yes. I think about this all the time. Like I not only am I very much like you in the sense that I want to know the truth.
Oh,
I know
yes.
with this at this point, like and you do go through like periods and there's waves. It's like a
Mm,
roller coaster of like wanting to know more, then taking a step back and realizing, we're we're really never going to know. And I don't believe we're supposed to. I think we're supposed to be in a place of wonder and curiosity and creating like that all makes sense to me. But you do go through these waves and it's fascinating to me because one, I like to know the truth and I like to get
yes.
to the truth. And I just find all of this so unbelievably fascinating. For me, I'm just like, I don't know how anyone is just like going about their normal routine, like picking up milk. Like, I'm like, I just needed to know more about aliens and
Yeah.
NDEs and you know what I mean? Out of bodies. Like, I can't get enough of it. Like, it's just, and maybe that's just it, at the beginning it is a little bit easier to take a step back, but once you get to a certain point it's almost like there is just
Mm,
no going back and you can't really live a normal life anymore. I mean, you can, but like you're not thinking the same
yeah.
way at all. It's
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, Ellie. And you have a very valid point. Absolutely, very valid there. Because for myself, when the major experience that I had that was an interaction with what we call extraterrestrials or perhaps ultra-dimensional beings, it was a very savage experience, but it did, back in 1989, give me the opportunity to think seriously. And of course, I was very honored within 1996 to have been credited with a theoretical part, a piece to the phenomena, because most people were talking about abductions as being very physical. There were two aspects to the experience that I had then, which was one part was physical, one part was non-physical, and
Mm,
there was interaction on both levels, as it were. But I think and feel, yes, how do you operate within a world? And I found that very difficult because, and again, the question, why me? But
mm,
thankfully me, because that's made me wake up to a degree to look at the world in a very different way. But
yes.
and what makes you unique. But of course, I have to state here that I'm not unique. We're all unique. But there was something about the experience which warranted me to find out why certain people are selected and why many other good folk out there are still going about their business and having a wonderful time. I mean, going back, yeah, before all of this came about, I was quite happy to, do what I was doing and
Mm,
go to work. And this is all that I knew. But then, of course, more came in that I was forced to know, that the system that we serve does not want the people to know.
yeah.
And one of those areas was of great interest because many years ago I went on a TV program with Nick Pope and Georgina Bruni, the late Georgina Bruni. And this is interesting. And Georgina Bruni wrote a book called You Can't Tell the People, which was all based around the Rendlesham UFO event in 1980. And of course, I then, through synchronicities, found myself getting involved with that and then teaming up with one of the original investigators and writing a book on that. But that aside, Georgina Bruni had been at a meal with Baroness Thatcher, Margaret Thatcher, which was one of our late prime ministers. And Georgina Bruni dared to ask her privately about UFOs because she was working on this book. And get this, Baroness Thatcher asked her guards to stand back. And she looked at Georgina Bruni and she said, UFOs. She said, first of all, you have to get your facts right. And when you do get your facts right, that's why you find Why We Can't Tell the People. So her book was called Why You Can't Tell the People. And this is another area that fascinates me, like yourself and many others, that within the variances of UFO contact, we have the love and light. Absolutely. The same with near-death experiences who have positive encounters. We also have those who don't have those good experiences, and
Um,
especially also within ufology. And like human, there are two parts to us as well. So, but talking about that with regards to the secrecy in the Pentagon, and of course with the
mm,
future developments with regards to Grush, and that again, the system says, nope, you can't go there. We're
yeah.
not going to allow you to go there. And it's fascinating because you're thinking, well, why can't we go there? What is it that you don't want us to know? And of course, when you said again, like living a normal life,
Yeah.
heck, that's wonderful. But thankfully, you, me, and many other people have been touched to some degree by this singularity. It doesn't mean to say directly from it. It could be just a passing interest, but at least your consciousness, your mind is open to that facet, to
Mm,
that part that's saying, hang on just a minute, there must be more to me. What
yeah.
is love? What is creation? Where do I stand in all of this? What are we? Where do we come from? And of course, you could go to bed with a headache thinking about it all in one day, or you might,
Absolutely.
but
Yeah.
it is fascinating. So you're right; it is hard to function.
And I don't want to harp on it too much because it will open a million doors, but I would like to talk a little bit more about some of your experience, especially
Yes.
1989.
So when my brother and I had been aged 13, and that was in 1982, my grandparents lived in Tatchbrook Road, Felton, Middlesex, in a very big house. And we, my brother and I, my grandmother, out in the back garden. We used to spend all our vacation periods with them. And, the sky was blue, but the silver orb came over. It was rather now we think of Foo Fighter and what they call Foo Fighters, but it was the size of a football and it was completely silver and it came over very quickly and hovered because there were 3 stories to the house, but hovered over our grandmother's head, but in line with the second floor windows. And we were so shocked by this. And when we asked our grandmother, who didn't seem fazed by it,
Mm,
what this was, and she said, the fairies have come to take a closer look at us. And I think she said that to allay the fears of what it could possibly have been.
mm,
So that was one main event. And then, of course, leading then going forward into 1982, I mean, it was all hushed tones when that was spoken about. And strangely, not really to be repeated, although my grandmother was psychic.
mm,
Now, in 1989, we'd moved to the village of Marston Mortain, and I remember I came back from work, and I document everything now in dates and times. But during this period, we didn't, because I didn't even think that anything like this would happen. And the after effects of that shock were paramount. But
Mm.
what had happened is that I'd come back from work from Bedford. I drive, but I got the train from there then, and came into the house. We lived in a cul-de-sac, and our house had a driveway and glass all to the front. And I came into the door, and it was getting late. It was roughly about, say, about 10 past seven, quarter past seven, for want of an argument there in terms of time. And my brother and my sister were in the kitchen diner. So I walked through the hall, through the glass doors and into the kitchen diner. And then, of course, we had a big conservatory out the back. And then the garden that followed on from there. So I'm at home, leaning back against the cabinets, and just looking with the door open through the kitchen through to the hall where I'd just come through. The dog was sitting in front of the breakfast bar. My sister was to my far left, and my brother was directly in front of me. So he couldn't have access to the hallway. He was looking at me. We were talking. And all of a sudden, the atmosphere changed. It became electric. And I noticed it because, like, the hairs on my arms, and on slightly on the back here began to raise upwards. And the dog began to react, started to growl. And my brother then went into a trance. I mean, he just froze, and he raised his head slowly up to the ceiling, and he said, "There's going to be an earthquake, or grandma's going to die." Now, there was no earthquake, and our maternal grandmother at that point was still very much alive.
Mm.
And I was stunned. And then when I looked out to the hall, where the glass was to the doors and the windows there was a light that was coming up, and it was like a white light. And I thought that our mum had come home early from working late, because we have a driveway. But as the light intensified, it got brighter and brighter, and the dog was reacting even more. And then I became even more scared, because I'm like, what the hell's going on? My brother's frozen in front of me. I don't know. My sister can't remember what was going on, so I don't know if she was knocked out temporarily. That's what we think. And then through the glass in the hall started to waver, as though it was becoming pliable, like jelly, I suppose you could call it. And my mind's screaming, "This is not possible. This can't happen." I mean, physically, scientifically, that's not possible. And then the light grew, and then this small being, it was about 3 foot in height, all clad in black. It was diminutive in size. It was all in black. But I noticed it had what I thought was a motorcycle helmet on its head. And it wasn't a motorcycle, but it just seemed that the proportion to the head was much larger than the body. And it just merely stepped through the glass that was very pliable, and then shot ahead into the downstairs study and bedroom that my brother and I shared at that point, because we were 20 years of age, and we had our own study and bedroom and downstairs like bathroom, because there was an upstairs to it as well. So the light disappeared, the glass went to normal. I was shot. Ronnie came back round. My sister came back round, and I said, "There's an intruder in the house." And I picked up a knife from the drawer behind me, the biggest knife I could find, and I said, "There's an intruder in the house." I shouted it. And then whatever this thing was, came from round the corner ahead of me, to the left, and then ran across the hall and up the stairs, and it disappeared. Well, the real horror was just about to play out. I mean, I've had some wonderful experiences, a few of them. This is the only negative one that I had. And in the early hours of the morning of that morning, I found myself on my back, floating in the hall where that thing had come through earlier, and with my head facing the kitchen door. So something had got a hold of me, but I was like floating. And I awoke and thought, well, what the hell's going on, and why am I here? But then it felt like there was a force pulling me forward. And as it pulled me forward, I saw myself going through the kitchen glass door, and thinking, well, that's impossible. And again, this whole question of the science behind glass or
Yeah.
physical objects.
Was it
So
almost like a plasma? Like, did it look like more like a plasma? No. Okay.
no, from
Okay.
my perspective, it just felt like I was me, but being pulled through this structure, through the glass.
Interesting.
So anyway, I'm being pulled through, and then turned round on my back, so that I'm laying on my back, and my head is facing that way, going ahead. So it's pulling me forward. And then we take it through to the kitchen. I can see the dog asleep in the corner, doesn't react to me at all. And I'm going out to the conservatory and then in the garden. As I come out in the garden, it seems like I'm arched upwards, still 3 foot off the floor. When I look up to the sky, there are hundreds of UFOs that are moving very quickly. And I'm like, well, they're here. What's the problem? What's the issue? They're all here. They're real. At that point within my mind, there was no question of it. But
Wow.
there was one object that was stationary, a larger silver, kind of like a gray. I'd say because I'm colorblind, I do know my basic colors. It's like if you have a dirty gray, if you will, or like a kind of like that color of a craft that just hung there and it was dark. There was no lights on it. And immediately when I clocked it, I was pulled up to it, going faster and faster and faster. Where my solar plexus was, it felt like I was on a big dipper, but being dragged upwards. And
Wow.
then I thought I was going to hit it and bang. So there are two more parts which are interesting. The last part is very interesting. On a level that I think your audience might find interesting. So I woke up and then I found myself in this what I would call a medical room, but it was a little bit dark. But ahead of me was some light, so I could see there was some light protruding to my left. Always the glass and left. There was no glass here, but it's to do with getting through solid matter and left and light. So I found myself laying on this medical bed. I'm strapped down, but it's very hot in here. And I can remember everything clearly. I didn't have any regression because I'm hard to regress. I remembered it as it happened. I can still see the layout of the kind of like the fixturing that looked like it was fixed to the floor, like it was all molded.
Mhm.
But where I'm laying, I find that it's really hot. I'm really hot. It's like a sauna in there. And I find myself that I'm strapped down. At that point, I start to panic. And when I look to my right, um, there are three huge, well, I suffered for this, but in terms of, ridicule, but I can only report what happened. There were three huge reptilians. They were very powerful. There were three of them standing side by side to each other. And when I clocked them, I was absolutely shocked. They had a dark color. They were almost like I suppose you'd say like a T-Rex, but if you imagine them being humanoid and not so lizard-like as like a T-Rex. And immediately that was it. I'm like, I'd never seen anything like this before in my life. I don't know what they were, where they came from, why I was here. And then I found embarrassingly that there was some movement into the lower abdominal region where I was strapped to the bed. And I knew that something had been inserted, but it felt like it was investigating into the lower abdominal region. So I could feel it like a pulse or something. And at that point, I freaked. So I started to scream, but the feeling I got from these things was that there was no empathy. I was just a piece of meat on the slab. And people, when I go back to that point all the time within my mind, it is raw and savage. So yeah, that's kind of like hard because I didn't know who they were. I didn't know they even existed. I didn't even know that you could put them with any of the other connections within ufology as a 20-year-old. They weren't spoken about. But anyway, as I screamed and I wanted to get off and this thing out of me, they had disappeared. And then the thing was being retracted. I was being released, and there was a small creamy grey that appeared around that corner, around the left where the light was coming from. So it approached me. It was quite cold, but I just wanted to get the hell out of there. It ordered me to dress, that's all, and I was to follow it. I went round that corner, which led to a corridor. We're coming to the last part now. And there was lighting in here, but I couldn't see a wall. I couldn't, I couldn't see, sorry, if there was a door or anything. It looked like a wall all the way through. It was like one big long corridor that come to an end, and there was nothing there. And as we come to the end of that wall, the grey looks at me, and then the wall disappears, and I can see the village at a height. It's still dark, but getting into morning. And when I looked down, there was some other activity. There was something that was hovering by our conservatory. And I thought, my God, is that another smaller craft? What the hell is that? I'm like, I got to get out of here. And the Grey's looking at me like, you got to go. And I'm like, you want me to go? I had the impression of a big, large tree in my head. I don't know what that meant. And then it felt like I was pushed, but I found myself coming now out of the craft. There was a grey to my right, a grey to my left, but I was ordered not to look at them. And I thought, well, that's strange. What difference would there be in that? Because I've just seen one up there anyway, not just the three reptilians.
When you
So
say
when I
ordered, this was telepathic. They were,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
All right.
It's almost like you and I talking, but it's like a knowing with regards to that connection.
Mhm.
It's really weird. And I have thought about that because I thought, well, was I speaking or was it in my mind? And I'm like, well, I think it was in my mind because I didn't see any lips moving on it or anything like that. But as I came down to the ground, I was now met with my most incredible challenge because those two greys just disappeared. I came down to the ground, and ahead of me was this last grey. Oh my God. And it was standing there with its arms folded. It was in a one-piece uniform and it had a pointed hat, a stupid pointed hat on its head, but the hat was smart. It seemed to encompass its entire uniform. So it looked kind of smart.
Yeah.
It was dressed in a one-piece uniform. It had knee-length boots on, and it was kind of a bit more muscular. I'd say not as humanized, but it was more muscular. And its eyes were large. It had a pointed chin, but its arms and it was looking at me really angrily. And I'm like, "You're angry with me. I'm angry with you
Right.
because of what I've been through." I said, kind of like really annoyed. I wanted to punch him. I really wanted to knock him out, but I couldn't move. And so he's looking at me like, "Well, what have I done?" So I thought, well, I need to ask him a question because I know that this experience, I will be able to tell people what they are, where they come from. I said to it, how the hell am I able to get through locked and bolted doors? How is that possible? And all of a sudden it looked shocked, like, like I'd hit it, but I hadn't. And then it started to lift its head slowly up to the underneath of this smaller craft. I assumed it was his. And then it started to rasp in a slow, unintelligible electronic language, rather like the voice synthesizer that my brother and I used to have for our ZX Spectra, ZX 81, Cheetah voice synthesizer. And at that point, as it froze, I then saw myself coming back through the glass really quickly through to the kitchen. It was like, and then back into my body like crunch. And at that point, I had a nosebleed and I had to sort myself out. Now, just two things here very quickly. The next morning, I was really traumatized by it. My brother checked my body over. I had three triangular marks behind the right ear, had three triangular marks on my right arm, I had profuse nosebleeds to the right nostril that was going to be cauterized a few years later, and until they stopped from the doctors, and I couldn't walk properly. But we tried to take a picture of the three marks behind my right ear because they were quite pronounced in a triangle. But every time we used the self-developing Kodak camera, Polaroid Kodak camera, it would not come out. It just came out as a blur. So years later, I had problems with my right ear, and there was a situation with the doctors with that, which was very strange. There could possibly have been an implant in there, but one researcher, this is why I say to people, please don't change your narrative whatsoever.
Mm.
Keep it as it happened. Don't color, add, subtract. Now, he said to me, he said, Philip, may I just point out, and this is Pierre Sabac in England. He said, can I just point something out to you? He said, what your brother had done earlier that evening when he went into this strange trance and he lifted his head up and looked at the ceiling and said, there's going to be an earthquake or grandma's going to die, and something that you didn't understand. What was the grey at the end doing? He was mimicking what my brother had done in the early hours of that evening
Wow.
when he seemed to like look shocked, slowly raised his head up and started to talk in an unintelligible metallic language that was like random. And then he froze. So this is very interesting with regards to the experience. Now, although that was negative within its light, when I did eventually get published by publishers and long before Amazon with books
Mhm.
and with contracts, I did write a book. The first one was Reaching for the Divine. That was about spiritualism and about life after death. And the other one that came out in 2009 was called Believe, Bridging the Gap Between the Psychic and UFO Phenomena. I included this case in there But the publishers retracted the part about the reptilians because he believed there was no connection to be made between the reptilians and the Greys. But thankfully, I had the whole thing published in an article years before, which proved that case. So that was the 1989 event. Hard to believe, hard to get through
Wow.
to your head, but it actually happened.
How many cases have you heard where, because I don't think I've heard of people seeing different kinds of beings, but at
Yes.
different times. I've never heard it like this where it's
No.
essentially one experience with so many different beings. That's very unique.
Yeah, there were three of them. I mean, if you think about the reptilians
Yes,
and even at that point, after the experience, I even tried to deny that it happened for my own peace of mind to just move on with my life
yeah.
because there was no way that you could connect reptilians with grey aliens and then the other
Especially
grey
at
at the
that
end.
time.
And you know the strangest thing was with the last grey that I call Noddy. I named him that because he reminded me of Enid Blyton's Noddy character. She was a famous British author here in England. If you've seen animated plastic moving, it's quite disconcerting. But there was some kind of familiarity about him. I don't know where or from what. Um, so yeah, I agree with you. I think that, but the connection between these three different links between these extraterrestrials, as I assumed at that point, but it was the reptilians that really really affected me. And I've had people telling me what it was all about, where the reptilians came from, even, my goodness, their name and high command. I just lose the plot at that point. What I
Mm,
do is I just acknowledge what happened. Um, but yeah, so, from my perspective, people have said to me, "Oh, you had this experience because you're a negative person." And I say to them, "I am the least negative person. I've had really amazing experiences, my twin brother and I. That was the only major difficult one." Now, my brother also had one when he was young, an abduction, but that was very different. One, he had one, I had one. We could have had more in terms of abductions. The rest were close connections with UFOs, and I mean close, close up.
and was
But
that prior to this experience or after?
yeah, no, my brother's was years before, and not long after we saw the appearance of the metallic Foo Fighter type thing in broad daylight with our grandmother. He actually was taking through an old Victorian house because we moved to a suburban area, and he was met by these doctors that were covered from head to foot in this strange uniforms, and they spoke British. I mean, mine never spoke one word to me at all, only through the mind, which was direct, like get dressed, get out, and nothing really explained to me in terms of a real speaking. My brother's was different. So when this is the confusing thing. Again, when you go into UFO research, one person has one experience with one type of beings, then you have an experience with someone else, and then you find that people have experiences with mantis, with tall whites, with tall greys, with short greys, with god reptilians. But remember, at this point, I was shamed
Mm,
because within the media, and I'm not out for scoring points or wanting sympathy, but I wanted to tell the truth because I never approached anyone. They approached me in every department of media connection. And I thought, oh, they're going to listen to my story and they'll be able to help me. No, they didn't back then.
mm,
It was more to do with mockery and
mm,
shame. But we've come a long way from there. Do I understand what happened to me, Ali? No. Can I
yeah.
still work out why it happened? Not a sausage, I'm afraid. But what I can tell you is that that promoted the understanding that we were dealing with more than just a nuts and bolts craft. And there
Yes.
was an element of time or a kind of like some kind of synchronistic occasions or connections linked there, especially with what Noddy, the last grade, did and what my brother did earlier that evening. Now, that was very disconcerting. And so he was mimicking or making a connection. Was there a sign in that? I couldn't tell you. It was just very, very strange, but nothing was explained to me at all.
So how much of how much of this were you and Ronald sharing with one another, with your
Oh, yes.
brother, with like how were you all processing this?
It was very difficult. I mean, with my brother's encounter that he had, I mean, he told me all about it. And, that's been documented and gone round in circles with that one. But he would put a guitar up by the door and then shove books up his back because he thought that this would stop them from coming in and taking him. How I dealt with it, there, it was more to do with shock. I think the shock more so with the system telling us that UFOs don't exist, and within the UFO community, well, you couldn't have had this with reptilians because they don't figure within the Department of UFO Studies or Research. And I'm like, well, I'm not lying. They were there. How can I denounce something that happened to me?
Mhm.
And then, of course, it got really muddy with regards to people telling me how it was, what they were, where they came from. And I was like, I lost the plot. At that point, I lost the plot. But it did give me every reason to really think long and hard about the process of all this being able to get through solid matter, all this to do with glass, all this to do with,
Mhm.
you know, uh, you know, communication that my brother was talking about, which was all scrambled, and the other grey that wouldn't give me anything. And then, of course, the other researcher putting that small bit together and trying to understand if we're dealing with something that operates on other timelines away from here, as opposed to what we experienced here.
Mhm.
And of course, my brother being knocked out, and we believe my sister too, because my brother went into that trance. I think the phenomena froze or whatever it was doing. But by the way, our house did was on a ley line then. It was linked to St. Mary's Church within the village in Master Mortain when we lived. But I survived the journey. And if anyone asks me, well, that was a truly negative experience, I'll say to them, yes, it was, but it actually opened up other areas for me.
Mhm.
And I just wish that they were able to explain more those that were involved with that,
Yeah.
the reptilians or the greys. But you never get that really from any of them. In fact, it's covered more than anything, unless, of course, you'll have it. You are a contactee, and
Mm.
you have those experiences. That's a different level of thought altogether. So
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Mm.
Unbelievable. I can't imagine, Philip. I really can't, especially as a child. I just
Mm.
uh yeah.
Mm. There
Uh
was the last amazing encounter that happened with other witnesses on the 9th of April 2016 at precisely 11:15 p.m. at night. Here, three massive UFOs, white, spherical, that had descended above us. It's another event that my niece was involved in. We just finished having a meal with some police friends, and I was coming back late that night with my brother, and my niece and my sister had gone further into another village. She clocked these objects and they descended above us. And that was quite spectacular. And they've been clocked from other researchers that contacted me. And the film that my niece had taken, because I wanted something, proves that then they don't know what they are. They're
mhm.
not man-made. They're not normal. So, but now, thankfully, there's been no other contact since that time. So, yeah.
Have you found any correlation? I would love to know if there's a correlation between like the time period from, I don't know, the 40s to the 80s where maybe these experiences were perceived as maybe more dark or negative and maybe more positive now, because her name is Nancy B. She's had experiences with all sorts of beings, but primarily the Greys. And her
Uh,
first experience, it wasn't positive. And from there on out, they were. And she was actually told by the Greys that there was almost one that she refers to as like her godmother in a sense, that looks out for her and checks on her. And they ask her, like, they're checking on how she's doing mentally, because they told her that the last thing they want to do is scare us.
mm.
I almost feel like there's these stories where from the past that there was more, I feel like more of them that seemed more negative.
With the system that we serve, it has done everything that it can to contain the subject matter. We know that.
Yes.
And birthing and our development as a human species is very painful. And I have to also acknowledge the fact that my understanding, my human understanding of that is within the area of, well, they've just taken me, they've done this to me. But going forward, it has helped me, it has assisted me. And the other experiences, I must point out, were absolutely amazing, not to do with contact, because that's the only abduction that I remember. There may have been some more, or we think there were some more, but I survived it. And
Yeah.
the going forward, I believe that the system that we serve has kind of like put this in bad light, I think in a major bad light to scare people.
Absolutely.
And I believe that there's something more to all of this. So I have gone through a major form of transformation in the way that I see this. I'm not saying that there aren't negative energies out there. Of course there are. But
Right.
I will also contest to the fact. So yes, I believe that, my perspective on that experience was to me negative, and it was scary only because we weren't told or haven't been told enough about the system about this. So we had no knowledge
Yeah.
to accrue. It just came out of the blue. It was savage. And it changed me, but it changed me for the better,
Mhm.
because this then led on to a deeper exploration of what I was, of what we were, of what they were, and then also instigating this other part of life after death. So I believe that, yes, the experience is painful and a shock,
Mm.
but that's the only way that we're to wake anyone up into the understanding
Yeah.
that, there are bigger things there. It is a painful change. It's a painful transmutation, but one I feel that I had to go through.
Mm.
So if you look at other authors in terms of ufology, their encounters started off as savage and raw, and then of course you'll find that they all went through a process of transmutation, and their thoughts began to change. And
Yes.
this is what happened with me, most
Yes.
definitely.
Yes. Yes. I would love just your opinion on what you just kind of think is, and without trying to prove anything or have hard
Yeah.
answers. This is just
Mm.
theoretical, and but I would love just your opinion on what you think we're experiencing right now, just across the world, whether that's on a very 3D level or a spiritual level, just a
Mm.
political level, control, all of that. Just where do you think we kind of are? What do you feel is happening? And what like positive insight do you can you leave us with at the end of
Okay. So there definitely does appear, to my mind, to be a negative force that is in control in the background, and something I think has been as old as the stars itself. There are positive forces that are coming in, and I believe that on two occasions where my brother and I have been in close proximity to UFOs, at close proximity, there may have been some kind of soul connection or soul link to assure us that, you're not from here. Your incarnation process is set here, but we're just checking up on you and to make you think about things. Now,
Mm,
there is a systematic war, a silent war, I think, from a system that is operating under perhaps the guise of some other force, some other extraterrestrial entity that's been here for a very long time and feeds off of us.
mm,
I think feeds off of our energy, feeds off of destruction, fear, control. But I believe that we're getting to a point now where we're beginning to awaken, that we're beginning to rise, that we are beginning to embrace the fact that no, what the system is doing to us is trying to force us down into a very simplified functioning. They're not interested in the questions we have about eternity, immortality, consciousness, UFOs, more than what the physical aspects of space represents. So I believe that we're going through a war, and this system is adamant to push us down, to keep us down. But a lot of people are like, no, we're not having it. We're wanting to raise upwards. We're wanting to unite. We're wanting to lift ourselves away from this hopeless and senseless wheel of non-productivity, of no real advancement in terms of spirituality, of what we are. So I believe that this war has been ongoing, and it's quite interesting, but I do believe that there is hope for us.
yeah.
And that hope is set among the stars, and especially within ourselves into those other aspects of dimensional reality.
Mhm.
I mean, when I did also pass over once and had an experience when I was a kid when we lived.
Back to when you were a kid, you had froze.
Oh yeah. So when I was a kid, I almost drowned in a swimming pool in South Africa, and I had what they call a near-death experience then. And I can tell you that at that point, when the severance was made, that I now understand is that it doesn't matter. You know what? They can do what they want in the physical department. We are more than that. We transcend space, time, and we transcend the body. I think it's really wonderful because more and more people are waking up, and the system is trying so hard to push us down. And the more our consciousness expands, the
Mhm.
more it's pushing us down. But I wouldn't be at all surprised if those at the top of this symbolic pyramid of power are themselves working with these darker agents.
Mhm.
And that's why they condemned anyone to use their mind, because they knew that the human mind individually and as united is very powerful, and that they send these agents of darkness in to check out you, me, or whoever. That one over there, their light's different. They're rising upwards. Go and check that one out. We want to bring that light back down again. But I do believe that things are changing and we are evolving, and that darkness will be set aside to bring in the light, as it were.
I couldn't agree more. I am at least that's where I am right now. And I'm hopeful of that. Who knows? I mean, I feel like I believe in everything and nothing at the same time, you know?
Best place to be. I
Oh
think
man.
walking that
It
delicate
is. It's a good
balance.
place. It's a fun place. It keeps me
Absolutely.
busy as well.
Yeah, I mean, we base most of our assumptions on theoretical content,
Mm.
and with myself, it doesn't make me clever. I am, and I will say, I was very, very embarrassed and very hurt by the experience back in 1989, not least of all because it happened, but also because of the media's
Yes.
treatment.
Mm.
But now I'm in good hands because we find that the subject matter is embraced by millions of people,
Yes.
and that I am not alone
Yeah.
in terms of these unique experiences, because we are all unique, and I think we are touched, or the singularity reaches out to us in certain ways. Maybe like children, we go through growing pains,
Mm.
and we need to be kind of like given a few lessons to say, hang on just a minute, we need to wake you up.
Yeah.
And the only way we're going to do that is doing what we're doing.
Yes.
And so I have awoken. Well, I've still got a lot to learn, as all of us have, still trying to understand the major components within not just the psychic department, but also the UFO field of investigations. But I know, and I do know completely and totally, utterly, that we survive death. And I
Yes.
also know that we are touched by multidimensional beings that operate on varied frequencies within the ether, or in dimensions as they call it. So it's fascinating. And also, I know we get tired, we got to live, we got to function. But when this is inspired, when the gateway to all that is given the inspiration,
Yeah.
given that motivation, my goodness, we can move mountains, we can
Yes.
create the most incredible things.
Yes.
And it's all about creation, it's all about evolution and spiritual evolution and what we are. So I think that we are primarily within the human form, especially with Earth, is the Garden of Eden, as they call it. But I think something's gone wrong here. I think it wasn't meant to be this way. And I think now that there are other forces are trying to help work through us as the instruments to make these changes. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
It's
Mm.
truly the most incredible time. It really is. I have to tell you this, Philip. I when I reached out to you about coming on and I received your email, I'm just, I had my admin hat on and I'm just sitting down like thinking I'm gonna read just another normal email. And for you, it was that, which is why it's so funny. I opened it and I was sitting next to my mom. I read it to myself at first, and I looked at my mom and I said, "We are living in the most incredible time." And I started laughing because your email was two sentences, and I have it printed out. I'm gonna frame it. Um, it just it it stopped me in my tracks, and it just made me realize, like, this is just amazing. You said, I would love to be on your show, but I'm out of town. I'm speaking at a UFO conference. And you said it just like it's just another normal Tuesday for me, and like that, I would have never in a million years thought that I would be sitting on a podcast having a conversation with you about aliens and NDEs. You know what I mean? Like, I never
Yeah.
thought my email box would have an email that has something like that on the inside of it. It's incredible.
Well, you have to discover, and as you know, Ali, within yourself, that we are all important, that we are all connected, that,
Yes.
even though people have differences of opinions, they fall out or they don't agree with things. I think Shakespeare was right when he said, life's all a stage. And basically, you shake hands at the end when you've done your best performance
Yes.
and you go arm in arm together saying, well done.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I always joke and say when I get to the other side, I'm still going to get a refund, and you'll have to tell me from them and then from me that don't put me back down on Earth because there's a few problems down there that need sorting
Yes.
out.
Yes. Remind
Definitely.
me, I don't want to come
There's,
back down here.
there's a major issue going on at the moment, and sometimes I think a lot of us light beings or elevated souls are finding it very hard to exist down there. So give us a break, would you?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Give us all a break. Everyone, you know what I mean? Like truly,
Yeah.
it's everyone just needs a hug right now. Truly.
Yeah,
Everyone walking this
absolutely.
earth just needs a big hug.
Bless your
I
heart.
have to have you back on, Philip, at some point. I know you're busy as all get out, but at some point, or if not you individually, I do want to have everyone from the beings back together and I don't know, somehow make it like, I don't know, I want to do like some sort of game where I'm asking you guys questions that will, I don't know,
Yeah,
we'll coordinate it somehow and it will be fun. But
yeah,
I
and
could
although
talk to you
the
all day long.
yeah, and although the part that was in the Bings that I did was of the CE5 initiative before that was known, that was a Rendlesham. We can talk about that at some point in the future, which was incredible. But I have to thank you, Ali, so much, and very grateful for your wonderful connection, your wonderful talk, your wonderful link here, which is really beautiful, and it all serves to spread that message out of hope to everyone else out there.
Yeah. I thank you for coming on. I really do. You're again, you help the underdog and I appreciate your time. I've been so looking forward to this conversation. This has been amazing. This has been amazing. Thank you so, so much. I will have all of your every link to every book you've ever written, everything you have going on, I will put in the description box so
Oh,
people can
bless your
follow
heart.
along and yeah.
Thank you very much, Ali. It's been wonderful. Thank
Thank
you.
you. It really has.